Who is someone who was/is famous for being a good person, who actually did awful things? Jimmy Savile. Staying true to the question, he was literally worshipped during his lifetime, but only after his passing did people begin to realize what a f***ing monster he was. Absolutely horrifying. People in high positions at the BBC and in the royal family knew exactly who he was but kept it quiet. Nurses at the hospitals he visited knew he was interfering with children as well but were kept quiet out of fear of losing their jobs. Savile was worshipped in the UK for decades, but if there is a hell he would be top of the queue. This may be a different take on the question, but she was well known in her neighborhood for being the kindest, sweetest, and well-off landlady. Until they discovered that she wasn't. Dorothea Puente. She was known as a generous philanthropist in her neighborhood. Everyone who knew her admired her for her charitable work. Her catchphrase? "Call me Grandma." Who could doubt the bespectacled old lady who could bake, knit, and take care of kittens? But no one knew what really took place in the little boarding house that she had in Sacramento, California. In the 1980s, Dorothea Puente would take in the vulnerable and the homeless into her boarding house. At first, she would treat them very well, providing her tenants with food and comfort. Soon after, the little boarding house became a stuff made of nightmares. When Alvaro Bert Montoya went missing in 1988, Judy, his outreach counselor, tried finding him. Prior to this event, Judy had placed Bert in Dorothea Puente's care. At first, Bert expressed his comfort and satisfaction in Dorothea's home. Soon after, Judy was unable to contact Bert. When questioned, Dorothea would explain that he left with his brother for a holiday down in Mexico. This alarmed Judy, as Bert didn't speak to his family for years. Bert was also suffering from schizophrenia and was developmentally delayed. Then, a tenant named John Sharp from Dorothea's home told Judy that something was wrong, that Dorothea was digging holes in the backyard. Later, the police were involved. At first, they never doubted Dorothea Puente, the sweet old lady who provided care for the needy. But with permission and pressure from social services, the police dug Dorothea's backyard, only to discover the horrors. At first, they thought that they had dug up leather pieces that looked like beef jerky, but they soon turned out to be flesh. In total, Dorothea murdered 9 victims, 3 of whom she was convicted of. It turns out, Dorothea's past was not so squeaky clean as the image that she was portraying. She was convicted of forgery, murder, ran a brothel, and was charged and convicted of illegally cashing 34 state and federal checks that belonged to her tenants. With the money she stole from the vulnerable population, she donated them to charity and became known as a philanthropist grandmother of the neighborhood. It was a perfect cover-up to her almost perfect crimes. Dorothea Puente proved that you just never know what is behind the facade of a saintly image, that demons can wear sheep's clothes and parade around anyone's neighborhoods by doing good deeds, and that fame and reputation isn't always what's real on the inside. Anyone can seem good, until they aren't. Jim Jones. In hindsight, he is now recognized as a villain. But he was genuinely praised by everyone when he was at his highest. Him and his wife were the first white couple to adopt a black child in Indiana. He preached racial tolerance. For the anti-caps, he promoted communism. He opened the first church to openly invite blacks and whites, or at least one of the first churches. I don't really need to mention the villainy though, do I? Jim Jones. I was born decades after his death, so I always knew he was a psycho, but what the hell? Did people actually see him as a good guy back in the day? That's mad. He started out in Indianapolis, and basically integrated the city through his efforts. And there was a lot of racism in Indiana. It's 50-50 as to if that's something he actually believed in, or if he decided that was a cause he could use to gain followers plus attention. One of his biographers has said if Jim Jones had been hit by a car and died during the migration to California, he'd be remembered only as a great civil rights activist. I remember reading something one time about Gandhi being a bad person, so I curiously decided to look into it. Gandhi believed menstruation was a manifestation of the distortion of a woman's soul by her sexuality. When two of his female followers were harassed by men, he took it upon himself to cut their hair. While he was in his late 70s, to test his willpower to abstain from sexual desire, he slept naked with his grandniece when she was in her late teens. Following this experiment, he set up others. Boys and girls were meant to bathe and sleep together while remaining chastely. More women began to take part in Gandhi's experiments, sleeping with him while being forbidden to sleep with their own husbands. Letters reveal women participated in strip-teases, or other non-contact sexual activity. Many of Gandhi's explicit letters have been destroyed, but tantalizing remarks remain, such as, "Veena's sleeping with me might be called an accident. All that can be said is that she slept close to me." One might assume, then, that getting into the spirit of the Gandhian experiment meant something more than just sleeping close to him. In 1903, he wrote that white people should be the predominant race and that black people were troublesome, very dirty, and live like animals. Gandhi was incensed that Indians were treated better than the raw native savages. Throughout his stay in South Africa, Gandhi consistently showed his loyalty to the British Empire. The pre-Prime Minister of the Indian state Travancore once referred to him as a most dangerous, semi-repressed sex maniac. Gandhi married his wife Kasturba when she was only 14, and she was either 14 or 15 when she became pregnant with her first child, which wasn't out of the ordinary for the time, but if you read up on how much he actively talked about his sex-active life in provocative detail, it's hard not to villainize him. When Gandhi decided to become chaste, he would often still engage in explicit sexual conversation, letters, and behavior. He was assassinated in 1940. Mark Wahlberg. Wahlberg was accused of harassing African American students 2 separate times, by throwing rocks at them and shouting out racial slurs. He had gotten himself in trouble at least 24 times with the Boston Police Department, but the worst had not even happened yet. When he was 16, Wahlberg beat a middle-aged Vietnamese man and knocked him out in the middle of the street. Later that day, he attacked another Asian man with a metal hook. The now actor was charged with attempted murder, but he only pled guilty to assault. It ended with him being sentenced to 2 years in prison, but served a mere 45 days. Even more, Wahlberg went on to apply for a full pardon from the state of Massachusetts for his past crimes, but he never went through with it. Edit for those pointing out it was a long time when he was the kid. The title of this thread is Who is someone who was / is famous for being a good person, who actually did awful things. Notice did not does. Mark Wahlberg did some awful things when he was younger. That doesn't mean he hasn't changed. Woodrow Wilson, sure we have had some trash presidents since, but the damage he did through using his professional expertise to influence history and education still plagues the US education system. When people try to Ben Shapiro institutional racism, doing the whole point to a person, or a concept or thing, I point to the fact that thanks to Wilson some people think there is equal jasus belli in a war for slavery as a war for states' rights. Which is still the crux of all the stupid shit going wrong. The first movie to be shown at the White House was Birth of a Nation. He loved it. The war to end all wars didn't exactly have the lasting effects Woody was hoping for. The Senate didn't join his League of Nations. He resegregated a few things I can't remember at the moment and don't care enough to look up. But the worst had to be his hand in creating the Federal Reserve. Please like and subscribe for daily content. I love you. Margaret Sanger. She believed in eugenics and spoke often about weeding out weak genetic stock, and consequently placed Planned Parenthood primarily in black neighborhoods during its founding. Now, whether you believe poor or impoverished people should have children or not is irrelevant at this point in time, because during PP's infancy, if it weren't a completely racist agenda, access to PP should have been more evenly distributed to white folk as well, because white folk, surprise, were also in the position to be poor, too. Also, just because someone is poor doesn't mean they have poor genetics, but specifically targeting impoverished black communities under the guise of helping them make an informed choice seems pretty racist to me. Oh, she definitely was racist. I came over to mention Marie Stopes, who was also racist. A lot of the early family planning advancements rose out of eugenics, and I'm still not sure why people try to whitewash things rather than just dragging the dirty laundry out, airing it, and saying this person did these awful things, but we can do better, and we are. John Lennon. Most people view him as some pacifist icon, but he beat the f*** out of his first wife and other women. And he beat up his son. I can't take pacifist songs like Imagine and Give Peace a Chance seriously when they are sung by such a violent wife beater and child beater. U2 singer Bono evades taxes while pretending to be against extreme neoliberalism and capitalism. As if the greedy asshole doesn't already have enough money. His charity activism is probably motivated by boosting his ego, not by genuinely caring about the causes he advocates for. Beyoncé pretends to be anti-racist and feminist, but she does not practice what she preaches. Her clothing line is made by women of color in the southeast of Asia. These women are pretty much enslaved. They work in sweatshops for less than minimum wage, live on sweatshop terrain, are not allowed to leave that terrain. Very feminist and anti-racist, treating women of color like that because Beyoncé is too greedy to do things in an ethical way. And no, I'm not some right-winger who wants to attack leftist icons. I'm a far-left person who refuses to worship and glorify these awful people. P.T. Barnum, who owned a circus freak show and, if I'm not mistaken, started the Ripleys. Believe it or not, oddity museums. He exploited very vulnerable people for profit, most of them being disabled, disfigured, or just a different race, and was extremely disrespectful toward native/indigenous cultures, and items he received often were showcased the more grotesque/weird items for shock value, like the Fijian mermaid. I think it might have also been reported that he was insanely abusive and neglectful to his wife and children. He was just a very yikes person, and The Greatest Showman is not a good source of info about his life. Bill Cosby, Kevin Spacey, O.J. Simpson, Gary Glitter, Chuck Berry, Kanye, Jada Pinkett Smith, Prince Andrew, Dustin Hoffman, Bill Murray, Amber Heard, Colonel Tom Parker, Arnold Schwarzenegger, maybe not as awful as the ones above, but still, having an extramarital child with another woman, hiding that from your wife, and still actively continuing to be a part of that child's life while keeping your wife and other kids in the dark is pretty low. Any objective person would have to agree. Henry Kissinger. Once you've been to Cambodia, you'll never stop wanting to beat Henry Kissinger to death with your bare hands. You will never again be able to open a newspaper and read about that treacherous, prevaricating, murderous scumbag sitting down for a nice chat with Charlie Rose or attending some black tie affair for a new glossy magazine without choking. Witness what Henry did in Cambodia, the fruits of his genius for statesmanship, and you will never understand why he's not sitting in the dock at The Hague next to Milosevic. Anthony Bourdain. The Kennedys. Joe Sr. was a disgusting philanderer. Even brought his mistress to his house. Kathleen was disowned by her family because her husband was not Catholic. Only one brother went to her wedding. Rosemary was given a lobotomy on her father's direction and he never even told his wife. Rosemary never recovered and was institutionalized for the rest of her life, and for the most part people never even visited her. Joe Kennedy Jr. Kennedy had expressed approval of Adolf Hitler before the war began. His father sent him to visit Nazi Germany in 1934. He wrote to his father and praised Hitler's sterilization policy as a great thing that will do away with many of the disgusting specimens of men. 3. Kennedy explained, Hitler is building a spirit in his men that could be envied in any country. 4. 5. Made his money off of insider trading and market manipulation. Teddy Kennedy, Chappaquiddick. Drove drunk off of a pier and left his date in the car to struggle and drown. And he didn't even try to help her. And he got off, because Kennedy. And people still voted for him, just nauseating. Not to mention his alcoholism and predatory behavior towards women. JFK Jackie was his second wife and had an affair with his intern a la Clinton, serial cheater, didn't actually write profiles. Encouraged John F. Kennedy, then a senator, won the Pulitzer Prize for the work. However, in his 2008 autobiography, Kennedy's speechwriter Ted Sorensen, who was presumed as early as 1957 to be the book's ghostwriter, acknowledged that he did a first draft of most chapters and helped choose the words of many of its sentences. Marilyn Monroe death, prescription drug use. The medical records reveal that Kennedy variously took codeine, Demerol and methadone for pain, Ritalin, a stimulant, meprobamate and Librium for anxiety, barbiturates for sleep, thyroid hormone, and injections of a blood derivative, gamma globulin, a medicine that combats infections. During the Bay of Pigs fiasco in 1961, and the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962, Kennedy was taking steroids for his Addison's disease, painkillers for his back, antispasmodics for his colitis, antibiotics for urinary tract infections, antihistamines for his allergies, and on at least one occasion, an antipsychotic drug to treat a severe mood change that Jackie Kennedy believed was brought on by the antihistamines. This deluge of drugs often had side effects, including grogginess or even depression. To treat this, Kennedy took more still anti-anxiety medications. Yet, there is no indication that the medications impaired JFK's judgment during crucial moments in U.S. history. Lastly, the U.S. government had to have nepotism clauses added because of JFK and RFK. RFK, serial cheater, supposedly had an affair with Jackie. That vegan teacher reasons why, forces veganism down people's throats. Picks fights with random famous people, Nicocado Avocado, Gordon Ramsay, Echt, and tries forcing some of them to go vegan. Compared killing animals to the Holocaust. Who even does that? Doesn't give Bella, her dog, the proper food a dog needs, basically made Bella go vegan, was caught at a fast food restaurant near where she lives in Canada and denied it, though it was her. Apparently she's racist. Said Jesus was vegan, though it was stated in the Bible that he ate fish and meat. Correct me if I'm wrong, people who believe in Jesus. I think she tried forcing a person to go vegan despite said person not being able to because of either a disability or something to do with their health. Said coming out as vegan is harder/braver than coming out as a member of the LGBT community. Do think she came out as bisexual at some stage. Says that killing animals is animal abuse, though some farmers have no choice other than to put the animals down because the animal is suffering from something really bad. Sung in front of McDonald's, telling them to go vegan, and probably embarrassed the freak out of herself because of it. Said she wouldn't give her organs to people who really need them because they'll just eat meat anyway. There are a lot more things, but I'll cut it short. Justin Bieber, he came for vacations to a tropical country and my mom was a manager of the hotel where he stays for like 2 weeks or less. Everything was fine until he showed up at the restaurant at same time of a waiter that has very indigenous marks. He was very disrespectful only with that waiter, but not so obvious until we figured out in a weekly reunion. Then we set up like a trap to see if this was true and send the waiter to his room with some food. As we suspect, he didn't let the waiter enter and he just scream, "Ah yeah, it's you," grabs his order and closed the door. I was wondering if that hate for Latin people came with his separation with Selena Gomez precisely when he discovered Latin family of Selena. Couldn't be surprised, but I am that he still have fame across all this years. Jim Carrey. I cannot stand this man, and he gets so much fanfare. To a degree that I can't divorce what a piece of trash he is from any of his work, which is a bummer because I loved Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I embraced for people to come at me here, but allow me to show my work. While he was dating Jenny McCarthy, who also freaking sucks, he latched onto her anti-vax garbage. Here, while she led the charge linking vaccines to autism, he smugly went along and was an absolute condescending prick about it. Carey was dating a woman who died by suicide, not when they are together. While she had a history of mental illness, Carey was charged with a wrongful death suit that stated he introduced this woman to drugs that eventually lead to her overdose death. Whilst I understand individuals have no control over others' actions, Carey was once again a spectacular jerk about it. His statements about her posthumously were that she was a beautiful but immature and emotionally damaged woman, stated that she already had an STD when they began dating, and that the reason she completed suicide was because she felt guilt about taking money from him. Sir, get freaked. All of this could and should have been done with respect to this woman who wrote about the level of emotional pain she experienced with Carey. Additionally, he speaks about mental health often, but, gee golly, when it actually crops up in his life, it's something that is met with so little compassion. Here also, I don't give a f if you're a method actor. It is not okay to treat people like dirt when you are becoming Andy Kaufman. The entire Jim and Andy documentary was an exceptional display of narcissism, and Jim Carrey is the epitome of someone with talent that believes that his art absolves him of the pain he causes others. My feelings towards him are also informed by the fact I'm a woman and work in a creative field where I am around very talented, entitled men. Yes, there are very talented women and non-binary people, but white men can come with an extra dash of self-importance and jerkery. Jim Carrey embodies someone who clearly struggles with their own mental illness, but in that struggle is an emotionally dangerous person. He sucks.